The selection of Snow White was carefully thought out. I had the sympathetic dwarf, you see. I had the heavy, the prince and the girl, the romance. I thought it was perfect. One evening, I acted out the entire story for my staff, all by myself. The movie opens with a close-up of a storybook, and we hear a song on the soundtrack. Something like, "Someday my prince will come," or something like that. And then the storybook opens, and in the first few pages, we learn the details of the background of our story. The beautiful Snow White, orphaned at birth, forced to do menial work in the Queen's household. Now, it is with a long shot of the Queen's castle that the action begins, as the majestic lady, proud and vain, approaches her magic mirror to ask, as she always does, who is the fairest of them all? And today, the mirror replies, that it is one within your very home, Snow White. Then the picture dissolves to our first scene of Snow White, doing her work with all the garden birds fluttering about her. We can see that she does long for one thing, as she does her tedious work, and as she goes to the well to fill her washing pail, she sings a song with the echo of the well singing back to her. Isn't that a wonderful idea? We can have fun with that, I think, and the echo can sing back her longing. And she sings a song of her yearning to find the man that she loves who will take her away and they'll live happily ever after. And the song could be something like, I'm wishing, see the echo? For the one I love to find me today. And she can enjoy this a bit, and you can do things like la 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 la. I'm hoping for the one I love to find me today. A handsome prince who has heard her approaches, singing the last line of the song. Today. Although Snow White is surprised and runs away, it is clear that here is the very man she has been wishing for. Meanwhile, the Queen has ordered her huntsman to take Snow White out that very afternoon and slay her. You must bring me her heart to prove that the deed has been done. And so, we see Snow White unsuspectingly going out into the forest with the huntsman. And then we see a close-up of his knife. No, that's not it. No. Snow White is running ahead of the huntsman, very joyful and gay. Oh, she sees some flowers. She decides to admire them, maybe pick one, and then she sees a shadow in front of her. Yes, a shadow, and it's of someone approaching, someone behind her. She turns and she sees the huntsman, and his knife is raised into the air. But then, he can't go on with it. He begs her forgiveness. He tells her to run, flee, escape the evil power of the Queen! And she takes off into the forest. And this can be a thrilling scene in which we see that Snow White is not only frightened of what has just happened, but by the specters her mind imagines around her as she runs through the strange forest. And finally, she falls to the ground in tears. But then, the haunted eyes that have been peering at her from the brush emerge. You see, they are only the animals of the forest, as frightened of Snow White as she has been of them. They gingerly approach, and Snow White brightens, realizing her mistake. And then she sings a song to help her forget her nightmarish experience. Something like, with a smile and a song, life is just like a bright sunny day. Your cares fade away, and your heart is young. You know, something like that. And then the animals take her out of the forest to a house, a cottage they find in the woods. Snow White approaches the house, she finds no one about. She knocks on the door. No one answers. She pushes open the door, and she finds this cottage is so very dirty, with dust caked all over and everything in disarray. So she decides she will clean up the house with the help of all of her animal friends. And she sings a song as she works. Something like, whistle while you work, and cheerfully together we can tidy up the place. So hum a merry tune. It won't take long when there's a song to help you set the pace. Meanwhile, some distance away, the 7 dwarves are introduced in song as they dig, dig, dig in their mind. Something like, we dig, 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 dig in our mind the whole day through. To dig, 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 dig is what we really like to do. Now, we need to talk about these dwarves because, you see, remember the silly symphony we did, Babes in the Woods, with all those elves, so many elves, and they all looked exactly alike. It's funny, but kind of frightening. Now, with this, the 7 dwarves, you want each of them to look individually different from each other. But then again, in this scene, we just see the 7 dwarves. They're digging away, and I'd like to see all valuable jewels around them, like rubies and sapphires and diamonds. And we see that they're not too concerned with those. They just really just love digging, and they dig, dig, dig all day. And then finally, at the end of the day, they pack up their belongings, and they head home. And I think we should have a signature tune that they sing when they leave home and go to work, and when they go back home. Something like, hey ho, it's home from work we go. Something along those lines. Now, Snow White, she's back in the cottage, and she's done a wonderful job of cleaning up the household. Then she thinks there's a 2nd floor of this cottage, and she goes upstairs to explore. She goes up to the 2nd floor, and she enters the room, and she sees 7 tiny beds. And she concludes that these beds, well, I suppose they must be beds for children, she thinks. And the beds they make her very tired, and she decides she'll sleep on 3 of the beds that are laying side by side. And she covers herself with a bed sheet, or the animals, they're still with her. Maybe 2 birds can fly in and cover her with the bed sheet, and she falls asleep. You see, but what she doesn't know, Snow White, is that she's sleeping on the beds of the dwarves, who are on their way home. And we can, in fact, begin to hear them. Hey ho, hey ho. And the animals, they can hear the dwarves coming, they feel their presence, and they all flee in panic, leaving Snow White all alone. But then the dwarves, they arrive at their cottage, they open their door, and they're so surprised to find their house all cleaned up. And they figure out that maybe whoever did this, whoever was responsible, may be upstairs on the 2nd floor. And they choose a patsy to go on up ahead. They choose the dim-witted dwarf Dopey, and he goes up to the 2nd floor, and because of his wild imagination and the shadow cast by his lantern, he thinks that the figure under the sheet is a scary ghost. Ah! He runs back downstairs, probably bumping into the other 6 dwarves, and they can all roll around like bowling pins. And then all 7 of them get together and say, well, let's all go up there and see what the story is. And all 7 dwarves will see them going upstairs to the 2nd floor. They enter the room, and then Snow White, she awakens and surprises them all by identifying each one of them by their names. Oh, I forgot to say that. See, when she first came into the room and saw their 7 beds, on each of the footboards, we should see that she can see their names are carved there. And now she's able to identify each one. Ah, you must be Duck, and Happy, Sleepy, Sneezy, oh, Bashful, Grumpy, Dopey. And then she tells them of her plight, and offers to work, clean and cook for them if they'll let her stay. And they all happily agree, all except for Grumpy, who doesn't want any part of her or her problems. But then she surprises them all, shocks them in fact, by demanding that they clean up before sitting down to dinner. Now, this can be a historical scene where we see these dwarves who never wash themselves. They can have some soap fights, they can dunk each other in the water, and this, is another opportunity for us to work on those bubbles, how difficult they are, as we all know, the reflection on the bubbles as they float about. They sit down to dinner, they're all clean, they have a wonderful dinner, followed by song and dance, and the house sparkles like it never has before. Meanwhile, back at the Queen's castle, the Queen has learned the trick that has been played on her by the husband, when she asked the mirror, who is the fairest? And the mirror replied, Snow White is still alive. Well, now she's determined to get rid of Snow White for good, and she hatches a diabolical scheme. She will offer Snow White a luscious red apple with a deadly curse that cannot be broken except by love's first kiss. So she stalks down to her dungeon laboratory at night to make her hideous transformation. She takes the potion to change her royal garments to a peddler's cloak, a scream of fright to turn her hair to white, a blast of wind to fan her hate, and a thunderbolt to mix it with. And then she drinks the potion, and detail by detail turns into a cackling old crone. Then she prepares the deadly apple, and through the foggy night sails her boat through the swamp to reach Snow White by morning. And that morning, the dwarves, as they're setting off to the mine, they plead with Snow White to be careful and really be careful of the evil queen, they ask of her. She tells them all will be well, and she kisses each of them goodbye. And then the dwarves, after they've left, the queen, disguised as the evil old lady, she arrives and offers Snow White the luscious red apple to be used in baking a pie. She pleads with Snow White to taste it first. Snow White does, and falls to the ground in a dead faint. When the animals see this, they rush to get the dwarves, who race back to catch the queen. Amidst thunder and lightning, they chase her up a rocky terrain, and she backs up onto a precipice, an edge that crumbles down, and screaming, she falls to the ground, with maybe two hungry vultures flying down after her. Now, when the dwarves, they see Snow White, they are filled with grief, even Grumpy breaking down into tears at the sight of her. And then we see the storybook, and it explains that Snow White was so beautiful, even in death, that the dwarves didn't have the heart to bury her. Instead, they create a bier where she lies in state for the animals and the dwarfs to pay their respects. But another comes to visit. It is the prince who approaches, and as a farewell gesture, he kisses Snow White. Miraculously, she awakens, and grief turns to joy as the animals and the dwarves cheer for Snow White and the prince, who will now take her away, and they will live happily ever after. Well, after several exhausting hours of playing an evil queen, a sweet heroine, a handsome prince, and 7 individual dwarves, my staff were completely won over. Now, are there any questions at this point about anything I've mentioned so far?